saying that it's been a saying that really the United States and Bolivia don't have mutual interests that are substantial enough for the United States to take the kind of positions taken with respect to Venezuela, Colombia, and at least those countries. And so we have a chance, I think, to really have a functioning government that has done a lot in terms of redistribution of resources to the Bolivian people, including eliminating illiteracy, and that's something that they have been, the United Nations indicated they had done. So I think you have a very positive, from our point of view, it's very positive. What we found was a very positive development, and one that's quite independent of U.S. influence. Of course, there's no ambassador there, no U.S. ambassadors, no USAID there, so there's much less influence there than you would find in many other Latin American countries. So I take any questions you have. Yes, I think you would.
Yeah. Very, very interesting. Thanks for telling this story. There's a lot of review now being done on development programs. I'm one of the old veterans from the Land Tenure Center.
Oh, sure.
And we are so saddened by the fact that our own institutions can't maintain a center like the Land Tenure Center, which was interested in these problems of land ownership, having a base inside the country for people to develop their own economy. Anyway, I was wondering, oh, by the way, there's been a review of USAID's successes and failures in Afghanistan, and it is dismal, absolutely dismal. They have made essentially no progress. Now, I was wondering, in terms of Bolivia being in charge of its own programs, how have they approached universal education and health care and improvements in slum housing?
Well, I think that particularly in healthcare and in fundamental education, they have really devoted a lot more resources to that than they had before. The government wasn't very interested in that before the Morales government came into power. That's one of the things that Morales has stressed, a redistribution of resources and bring the people who have not had access to education or have not had health care to bring those things to them. I don't know specifically the program. We didn't go into the health care program in any detail there, but we were told by people that this is a program that is really working for the Bolivian people and for many people who really didn't have health care in the past. They've now have clinics in areas where there was no service, health service previously. And I think they've done a lot in that regard. Yes.
Yeah, there is something about term limitations 2 times, 3 times, and then the acronym of AID. The first thing of the term limitations. Can he be amended? Can he have 15 times 4 years, or what's the limitation?
Well, the term is for 5 years.
5 years, and then again 5 years, and then how often?
And then again 5 years. There are 3 terms, basically.
3 times 5.
But you see, the first time he was elected, it was under the old Constitution. Then they changed the Constitution, and this Constitution says you can only have 2 terms. And he had initially said, Morales had initially said he was not going to run this time because he had his 2 terms. He had 1 term under the old Constitution, essentially, and then the second term was under the new Constitution. But he decided that he would run again, and as a second term under this Constitution. And one of the people who was one of the other party members complained about this, filed a complaint, and the judicial branch decided that this was actually okay. This was the second term under this new Constitution. Now he can't. Now he, as of 2016, he can't. Or 20, as of 2020, his term will end in January of 2021. He can't run for the election.
Okay, so it's one of the old term and 2 of the new term.
That's right.
Okay,
yeah.
Okay, good.
1 under the old Constitution and 2 under the new one.
Tell me
That's
again
right.
the acronyms AID.
EID, Agency for International Development.
Uh-huh. And tell me a bit, what do they really do other than the name?
Well, I think you had an answer over here about the kind of things they do. What they do is they allegedly in Bolivia, they work with opposition persons, opposition parties. They may work with bankers or with opposition politicians who favor a neoliberal kind of approach, and they do that informally, but the idea is to build resistance to the Morales government in this case. And that's what allegedly they were doing. But the motive for the immediate motivation for getting EID, which is the U.S. Economic Mission, that's what it's called, it's the Agency for International Development, it's called formally. The motivation was when Secretary Kerry used the word backyard. When he used that word, then Morales said, "We're not having no more of this." And the EID can leave.
Tell me, Alto has mainly developed in recent decades.
Yes.
I still remember 1969, I was there first, and then a few decades later there was a bit more. Is that sort of a more recent?
Yes, it is. It's been growing enormously. You know, I think there have been a lot of people there for a long time, I think. But this is really, it's where the international airport is located for La Paz. But it's grown tremendously, and it continues to grow. And it's our concern with being there is that you see, as I say, not many paved roads, and there's a good deal of poverty there. But they say that the people largely have work in La Paz, and now they can use this funicular route to get to La Paz in just a few minutes. So, but it's a community that obviously has a lot of needs, I would say.
You know, I understand the concept and perhaps the motivation for having international election observers in different countries. But this is a practical question. Like, do they have any foreign countries that observe European elections or American elections? And then number two, who pays for, who makes the request and who pays for it? Is it like United Nations or something that, I know the people like yourself are volunteers, but you know, who coordinates that? Is it the country who's having the election, or is it some international organization that's imposing something on those countries and funding the observers?
No. Well, the funding of observers, I think each of the organizations that have observers does the funding of them. That's certainly in our case. We paid for our trip to Bolivia and for staying there. The electoral, it's called the electoral Órgano Boliviano Electoral Plurinacional. That's the organization that the Bolivian election organization in charge of carrying out the elections. They're the ones who certify the observers.
Yes, first of all, it was an excellent overall view of the situation. No, I didn't hear you talk much about it. By the way, there's already talk about opening up the Constitution again, so Evo Morales can run indefinitely election. And but the human rights situation and the freedom of speech, persecution of the opposition, persecution of the press, already she just in the last 2 days named a new Minister of Communication, and she immediately announced that there's going to be restrictions on the use of Facebook and Twitter to spread the free opinions about the government. And within the Constitution, you put this law about what they are talking about, not what has happened, but the way in which things are implemented. You know, practically more than half of the opposition is in exile, even in the United States, Brazil, Paraguay, Argentina, Peru. It's a relentless and brutal persecution of the opposition leaders that were in the past. And the announcement of the minister was that, that Facebook and Twitter would be a revision, and they were going to look for ways to clamp on the use of Twitter and Facebook, because they are practically right now the only medium to communicate, and there is satisfaction with the government.
Well, I don't know, I'm not sure. I think that the government has been very strongly against certain demonstrations. They've sent people out, they've sent the military against people who are protesting. And one thing, they talk about the criminalization of social protest. That's one of the concerns there.
It's a crime, by the way, to also criticize or speak violently or criticize the leaders of the government.
Yeah, well, we heard a good deal of criticism, and I don't know, we were going to universities and to different types of funds and environmental organizations, that sort of thing. We heard a good deal of criticism, and I don't know, people seem to feel free in talking to us about it. Now, whether they would go out and say something in the public square and, and make that kind of critical analysis, I don't know, but they didn't have any problem talking with us about that.
Well, what are the main criticisms of Morales?
Well, one of the criticisms is that he's cracked down very hard on some of the groups that are protesting. For instance, the road they want to build through this forest reserve. There have been protests there. The government has dealt forcefully with those protests, and there are others that where the people have protested and the government has sent police or troops to. That's one of the things that people talk about. The principal concern is that and this is in the economic area, that the government has placed too much emphasis on mining and other extractive industries, and those are not going to be beneficial. They cause an immediate concern for the environment, and it's kind of a losing strategy because there's only so much. There are only so much minerals there. The price of many of these minerals are going down. The price of oil is going down. The price of other minerals, and so that's not going to be a productive resource for the future. There isn't enough thinking about what has to be done in the future. That's one of the principal criticisms that we heard. Yes.
Can you talk a little more about mining? Because mining right now is a problem all over Latin America, especially Colombia and Peru, and I would say Bolivia. What is the position of the government right now about that?
Well, the position of the government is really that they depend a good deal on the income that they get from mining. And I don't think there's any intent to end that dependency anytime soon. They would like to industrialize. They'd like to, as I was saying, Morales, when he came into government, was talking about industrialization. In other words, using these natural resources to develop industry within the country. And I gave the case of the lithium fields, where they've been unable to carry that through successfully. They're still working on it. There's been some criticism of Evo Morales also for deciding to look at a nuclear plant in a seismically dangerous area in, I think, near La Paz. And that's another example where something that you might have one think, well, we can get nuclear power from this plant. It's an expensive thing, and it's also in an area where it may be very dangerous. So there's concern about mining and the environment. There are lots of people who are very concerned about the effects of mining on the environment. On the other hand, the government is in a situation where to run its programs, and even these redistributive programs, which help with health care for those who don't have it, and education for those who haven't had access to education, even in those cases, the money has to come from somewhere, and that's what they basically are saying has been coming from largely these mining and oil resources. Yes?
I'm curious, you were saying that the isolation from the neoliberal capitalist model that was promoted heavily by the U.S. Have there been any sort of sanctions, economically or otherwise, from the U.S. or supporting nations or supranational institutions? development, or?
Well, I don't think Bolivia has basically independent of the IMF, as I understand. I don't think they owe anything to the IMF at this point. The World Bank, the same. And Morales has spoken out against these institutions. The Washington consensus that is controlled in Latin America and for many years, that's something that they oppose very much. I think that those programs really don't, it isn't that kind of dependency. That's one of the things they're trying to cut. The Inter-American Development Bank is another. If they don't take resources from these institutions, then those institutions don't have the control they normally exercise. And the U.S. government has always worked well with those institutions, which depend to a great degree on U.S. investment in those organizations, and it worked with those organizations to carry out its policy in Latin America. And that's something that is rejected, at least by the Morales government, by Correa in Ecuador, and by the Venezuelan government.
Yeah, has there been any attempt during the Evo Morales years of soft coup d'etat or like these color revolutions or something as it happened? The attempt happened last year in Venezuela or in other countries?
I don't think so. I don't know of that. I don't know. Maybe a great deal. I don't know Bolivian history a great deal of depth, but I don't know of any attempted coup against Morales since he's been.
Or just kind of like to put a lot of people in demonstrations against the government. And
Yes, there are demonstrations against the government, and they've come from things like their concern with the environment. But there has been, as was pointed out, I think over here, a tendency to use force to end those demonstrations. At the same time as using rhetoric to say that the government really is a government that functions for the poor and underprivileged and disadvantaged, and particularly the Aymara and other indigenous, Quechua and other indigenous people. Yes.
Thank you, Jack, for the overview. It's very illuminating. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about Santa Cruz. Because not long ago, it seemed like Santa Cruz was the at the boiling point
Yes.
in terms of its relations
Yes.
with La Paz. And there was a lot of it that was instigated by Brazilian farmers that had moved into Santa Cruz, and yet it sounds like now they've, kissed and made up in some way.
I think in some way, I don't know in any real detail, Francisco, what exactly has gone on there, but I do know that we were told that there have been leaders from Santa Cruz, businessmen and members of bankers, whatever, who've been incorporated into the ruling party, into the MAS, into Morales' party, and that has greatly diminished the opposition there. In fact, Morales carried Santa Cruz and the province department, and so there's been a kind of a movement towards assimilating these people in some of their interests.
Do you know what the quid pro quo might be?
I don't know specifically. No, I would imagine that there's some programs that have been advanced by the government that are beneficial to Santa Cruz.
Maybe to give it more autonomy also?
Yeah, there's a program for autonomy. There is a plan for greater autonomy, but we were told that that really hasn't gotten much off the drawing board so far. But yes, I think that's a part of it, that they have these several provinces pretty much more autonomous. And just how that's going to work out, I don't think it's clear yet how Santa Cruz is going to fit in with La Paz and the other Cochabamba and the other centers of Morales' power. Yes. Okay.
Did you hear any concern or any thought about what is happening with the economy of Venezuela? And